and welcome to Saints. We're grateful you could join in online today. We've prayed you'll be inspired in your journey of faith in a fresh way. Whether you're looking for a church or just curious about Jesus, our vision as a church is to equip the saints to be centered in Christ, devoted to people, and driven by love. So we'd love the chance to get to know you and help introduce you to opportunities here wherever you are on your journey with God. Consider coming to an in-person service next Sunday where we have a kids program for 2 to 13 years old too. Doors open at 10:30 a.m. for coffee and light bites, so come visit us in person. Follow our socials and stay connected with us so you never miss a thing. For now, enjoy this message from our team.
This morning, I want to read for what will be for many of you a very familiar story, but I pray that whether you've read this story a million times or this is your first time, I pray that the Lord would speak to you through it with fresh faith. I'm going to read this passage. It's from John chapter 4, verses 1 to 26. Here's what it says, John chapter 4. Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. Although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now we had to go through Samaria. So we came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go, call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you were a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshippers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshippers must worship in the Spirit and in truth." The woman said, "I know the Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us." Then Jesus declared, "I, the one speaking to you, I am he. I am he." Now, there's a type of fatigue that I think we can all relate to. It's that feeling of putting in the work for something but not seeing the results. All of the effort but no reward. It's not a nice feeling. But as demotivating as that might be, there's something I think which is even worse than that, and it's this. It's putting all the work towards something, and then you achieve the goal that you set out to achieve, only to find that thing completely underwhelming. All of the success, but no satisfaction. See, for many of you, you're actually right now living in the prayers or the answer to prayers that you prayed many years ago. Some of you are married to the guy or the girl who many years ago was just a dream. You thought that they would never notice you. You prayed fervently to the Lord. God answered. You are now married to that person, but you do not treat them as if they were your dream, right? Some of you have children that you prayed for many years ago, but sometimes you wish, gosh, I missed the single childless life. Right, some of you, right, you get to take home a pay packet that years ago you would have thought never was possible. You're living in the fruit of what you have worked for and prayed for, and yet you would never be able to tell because that thing, as good as it might be, just hasn't quite, if you're honest, hasn't lived up to everything that you hoped that it would be. You achieved precisely what you set out to achieve, and yet it didn't take long for you to realize you're still thirsty. See, most of us spend our lives in denial. We deny that that could ever happen to us. We think that as long as we get that next thing, I get that I'm not satisfied right now, but you don't understand. If I get that one more child will make me finally happy. One more pay rise will finally make me happy. One more bedroom in my house would finally make me happy. But behind that veil of success and ambition, we have this awareness at our soul level that we are deeply thirsty. A thirst that no amount of success or achievement could ever quench. And that brings us to today's passage. It's a story of a woman who tried everything in her power to fill her emptiness, to quench her thirst. And so I've titled today's message, A Thirst Unquenchable. And if you're taking notes, I've actually got 4 points this morning. Point number 1 is well. Point number 2, no. Point 3, again and again and again. Point 4, go. Okay? It'll all make sense in a moment. So actually each point has 3 points. You'll get it in a moment. Point number 1, okay, well. See, this story takes place at a well. And in the ancient world of the Old Testament, wells weren't just sources of water. Wells were sacred meeting places, locations that were loaded with symbolic and spiritual weight. Every time you see a well in the Hebrew scriptures, something significant is taking place. Can I give you some examples? Okay, here's well number 1. Genesis 24, Abraham, right, the original patriarch, he sends out a servant to find a wife for his son Isaac. What a great dad. Right? He sends out a servant to find a wife for his son. This servant arrives at a well. At the well, the servant prays for a sign, and it's at that well that the servant meets Rebecca. And Rebecca ends up being the woman who carries on the Abrahamic covenant. It happened at a well, Genesis 24. Okay, the second example in Genesis 25. So Jacob, who is the grandson of Abraham, Jacob travels to a foreign land. At that foreign land finds a well, and at that well meets his wife, Rachel. And through that encounter, the 12 tribes of Israel begins. Genesis 25. Fast forward a couple more chapters. Now in Exodus 2, here's the third example. Well number 3, Moses. Moses is on the run. At this point, he's fleeing Egypt as a fugitive. He arrives in Midian at the lowest point in his life, sits down at a well, defends 7 sisters from local shepherds, and eventually marries one of those sisters, Zipporah. And then in that moment, Moses goes from being an exile to the chosen deliverer of the people of God. You see, the pattern is unmistakable. A well equates to a divine appointment, a destiny-shaping introduction between a man and a woman who will eventually become his wife. 3 patriarchs, 3 wells, 3 marriages that literally changed the course of the history of the people of God. And so when John's first century readers are looking at this story and they see Jesus sitting down at a well in John chapter 4, they go, something's about to happen. Something's about to take place. Someone is about to meet their match. Well. Here's point number 2, no, because we see the well, we expect something great, but very quickly there are some things that become apparent to us that are just not adding up. There's 3 problems in this story. Here's the first problem. It's at the wrong place. Look at what it says in verse 5. He says, so he, Jesus, came to a town in Samaria called Sychar. Jesus is in Samaria. You see, what you need to know is that the Jews and the Samaritans had a long-standing feud. There was hostility between these two ethnic groups, resentment, religious rivalry, mutual contempt. You see, the Jews, they perceived the Samaritans to be ethnic and religious half-breeds. Jews would treat Samaritans with less respect than they would treat dogs, literally. And so the Jews thought very little of the Samaritan people, but the hostility went both ways. Because the Samaritans, they perceived the Jews to be corrupters of the faith. They thought that the Jews took the original pure revelation of the Pentateuch and they diluted it by adding their own man-made traditions and customs. And they thought that these Jews, that they've taken the original faith and they've corrupted it. They've meddled with it. They've muddled with it. And it's safe to say that these two ethnic groups, the Jews and the Samaritans, they did not get along. See, this is the first problem. This was in the wrong place. But the second problem is that this was the wrong person. Here's what I mean by this. See, a Jewish rabbi would never address an unknown woman in public. Never. Rabbis would actually warn men against conversing with women in general in public because the fear was that it would lead to some kind of moral impropriety. So a respectable teacher like Jesus would never be caught doing something like this. And yet here is Jesus who doesn't just respond to a woman initiating conversation with him. That would have been bad enough if Jesus was on the responding, receiving end. Jesus is something far more than that. He is the one that initiates and reaches out to this woman and starts a conversation with her. This is outrageous. This is scandalous. See, it's the wrong place. It's in Samaria. It's the wrong person. It's an unknown woman. But thirdly, it's the wrong time. It's the wrong time. In verse 6, John tells us not just where this event took place, it tells us when this event took place. And specifically, when was it? It was during noon. You see, the heat at this time of the day would have been unbearable. And the nature of the task, drawing water from a well, was physically strenuous. And so this was literally the worst possible hour of the day to be engaging in a task like this. See, it was the women's job to draw water for their households, but women tended to draw water together in the early hours of the morning as a social activity. And yet here is a woman alone at midday drawing water. And pretty soon we're going to find out exactly why. You see, all of the cultural warning lights are flashing. This shouldn't be happening. Wrong place, wrong person, wrong time. And yet this is what John says. He tips us off with something very important. He says that there is nothing accidental about this story. Because look at verse 4. Look at what John says. John says that he, Jesus, had to go through Samaria. He had to go through Samaria. Now, this is interesting because practically speaking, Jesus didn't have to go through Samaria. In fact, most Jews would deliberately go out of their way and take a long route in order to avoid going through Samaria. There was a well-worn path that Jesus could have taken that did not go through Samaria. This wasn't a geographical thing. So Jesus didn't have to go through Samaria in the sense of physically there was no other path. So what is John talking about? Well, what John is saying is that in a different sense, Jesus needed to go through Samaria. This whole thing was a setup. Jesus planned this. He orchestrated and engineered this moment. Jesus was on a mission, right, to find this specific woman, and he was prepared to cross every single barrier to get to her. Racial barrier, cultural barrier, gender barrier, religious barrier. He reaches across all of these divides in order to set up a divine appointment with this person. I wonder what Jesus may have orchestrated today to set up an appointment with you. I wonder what circumstances he had to align and move and shift in order for you to be here right now to meet with the living God. Well. No. And now thirdly, again and again and again. You see, Jesus reaches across multiple thresholds to get to this woman. But as we're about to see, she doesn't seem as eager, okay, to reciprocate that initiative. In fact, on 3 different occasions, she deflects and ducks and weaves in order to get away from Jesus. Have a look at what she does. Here's the first deflection. Look at verse 9. Right, the Samaritan woman came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" Right, Jesus is asking her for water, but she immediately puts up a boundary. She says, "You're a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" You see, this woman is very aware, and rightly so, of the reasons why she's disqualified, okay, from having a connection with Jesus. You're a Jew, I'm a woman who is a Samaritan. There's multiple reasons why we shouldn't be interacting right now. See, maybe you also, like this Samaritan woman, are very aware of the reasons why you shouldn't have anything to do with God and God shouldn't have anything to do with you. Maybe you think, I have the wrong cultural and ethnic background. I come from a long line of Buddhists. I come from a long line of whatever culture or religious background that your family comes from, and so I'm not a contender to be a Christian. This is a foreign thing for me. Maybe for you it's something else. Maybe your history or your life story is a little bit too spicy. You know what I'm talking about? Right? You feel like you've done too much. You've seen too much, you've experienced too much. Like, I could never be a follower of Jesus. Maybe it took a lot for you to step inside a church this morning because you thought this place is going to burn down if you step foot inside a church. Maybe you're very, very aware of, no, God could never love me. I'm not clean enough. I don't have the past that qualifies me to be a Christian. Maybe for some of you it's something else. Maybe you see Christianity as not intellectually credible. And you've got degrees. And you think, this Christian thing and me, we're just never going to mix. This thing is not going to work. See, like this woman, maybe you're very aware of, okay, you and Jesus, you believe that Jesus exists, but there's lots of things that stand in between you and Jesus ever having a personal, close connection. And so she deflects, she dodges. But look at the next thing. In verses 19 to 20, this is her second deflection, and this one's a little bit more personal. It's not just cultural or political, it's something personal. In verse 16, Jesus starts by asking her this open-ended question about her personal life. Go get your husband. It's an open-ended question, and he's almost giving her an opportunity to disclose whatever she wants to disclose. But then, after her response, he follows it up with what we understand to be a word of knowledge. In case you don't know what a word of knowledge is, it's an ability supernaturally that God gives you to know information about a person or a situation that otherwise you wouldn't know. Right? Jesus, outside of divine revelation, could have never known the fact that this woman has had 5 husbands. And so Jesus says, you were right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you've had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. Now, we don't necessarily know the particulars of each of these relational breakdowns. We don't know who was at fault, who was responsible, who's morally culpable. But what we can say pretty safely is that she had a tumultuous history in the area of relationships. And because of that, she would have been carrying something. She would have been carrying maybe some grief, maybe some trauma, maybe some stigma, maybe some shame, maybe a combination of all of the above. And the cumulative weight of that burden has driven her to draw water alone, to avoid any and all human interaction. And so Jesus asks her about her husband. He's touching on the most tender and most guarded part of her story. You see, for a woman already in hiding, so worn down by shame and grief that she can't even face her own neighbors, this could have been the moment, right, that sends her running, because he's touching a nerve. But think about what the Bible says about the God that we're dealing with here. In Psalm 139, Here's what that passage tells us about God. It says that you have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You see, the God of the Bible is a God who already knows everything. He knows every secret, every wound, every shameful chapter of your life. And so whenever God asks a question, it's not because he doesn't know the answer. It's because he wants us to see something about ourselves. And so Jesus asked her this question, a question to which he already knows the answer, but he comes to her anyway, not to expose her, not to shame her or humiliate her. If he wanted to do that, he would have cornered her in the town square and exposed her to the masses. He finds her when she's alone, when there's no one else around, confronts her about her wound, not to shame her, but as we're going to see in a moment, to actually heal her. Look at what she does in response. It's so fascinating. And I can relate to her, and maybe some of you can as well. Jesus sets up this incredibly powerful, intimate, personal moment. And what does she do to respond? She pivots to theology. She literally pivots to theology. He's like, you've got 5 husbands. The man you're with now is not your husband. And she says, I can see you're a prophet. Let me ask you about worship practice. Which worship style is better? Should we worship with lights or should we worship in a circle? Like, she's like, now, to be fair, this is a real question. This was a live question. It's not a trivial question. But in this moment, it's very clear, okay, that she's using theology as a diversionary tactic. Can you relate to this? I certainly can. Sometimes I'm very happy to talk about spiritual things. I'm happy to debate about when is Jesus coming back, or his predestination thing, or let's talk about the gifts of the Spirit, or what's a word of knowledge, and let's talk about styles and leadership and all that kind of stuff. And there's a time and a place for all of those conversations. But when it's used as a cover, okay, to stop Jesus from getting to those deeper, more tender parts of our heart and our life, then that's not the appropriate time or place. And so Jesus very quickly, he doesn't dismiss her, he answers the question very briefly, but then he quickly turns the conversation back to where he really wants it to go. And this is then her third and final deflection in verse 25. She's like ducking and weaving, and she's trying to get out of Jesus's conversation, and then she makes this one final move in verse 25. She says that I know that Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Right? It's almost this poignant moment. She finally acknowledges that she's got a need. She's saying, yes, things are a mess at the moment. Personally, clearly, Jesus, you know that my life is a bit of a mess. Culturally, politically, things are not right. That's what she's saying. Someone needs to come. I believe someone is going to come and sort all of this stuff out. But you see how she's keeping it still very abstract. It's impersonal. Someone's going to come someday, but not here, not now, not now. See, this is the moment. Jesus, he stops and then he answers her with an announcement. He answers her with an announcement and he says this. He says, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. I am he. See, this is a monumental statement. And there's actually 2 layers to what Jesus is saying when he says, I am he. See, firstly, Jesus is saying, the Messiah that you've been waiting for, the Messiah that the Samaritans, you guys are believing for and expecting, I am that person. You see, Messiah, if you didn't know, the word Messiah means anointed one or chosen one. And in the Samaritan culture, they had the idea of a Messiah, but it wasn't a political figure, it wasn't a military figure, it was more of like a kind of a teacher, sage-like figure. Kind of like a Moses who would come and kind of sort out the theological nuances of the day. That was their concept of a Messiah. And Jesus is saying that person, that is me. I am the fulfillment of that. But guess what? I'm so much more than that as well. Because this is the second layer to what Jesus is saying. She's saying, yes, I am the Messiah that your culture has been anticipating. But I'm so much more than that. Because when Jesus says, I am he, that's not just a grammatically questionable statement, because it doesn't sound quite right in the English, okay, but he's actually using a divine name. He's using a divine name. Some of you will know the story. Remember Moses? When he was about to be sent by God to deliver the people of God from slavery in Egypt, Moses stands before a burning bush and he asks God who is the bush in that moment, saying, God, what is your name? And then God responds to Moses and says, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. See, the phrase, the designation, I am, is a divine prerogative. It's a divine title. And right here at a well in Samaria at noon, Jesus is identifying himself with that same designation. I am Yahweh God. Not only am I the Messiah that your culture has been expecting, not only am I the deliverer that your people have been hoping for, I am divine. I am the Messiah. I am Yahweh God. You've got to think about this for a moment, right? The very first person in the Gospel of John who gets this revelation about who Jesus truly is. It's not a high priest. It's not a scribe. Not someone with religious pedigree and credentials. It is this woman, socially ostracized, alone with her jar of water. She's the one that gets it first. And it's so beautiful because it fits precisely into the pattern we were talking about at the beginning. You remember? Right? Isaac's servant at a well meets Rebecca. Jacob at a well meets Rachel. Moses at a well meets Zipporah. And now this woman, we don't even know her name. This woman at a well meets her groom. Not in a romantic sense, but in a divine sense, in a cosmic sense. Look at this passage from Isaiah 62, verse 5. It says that as a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you. This woman, she's been searching. She's been going from person to person, relationship to relationship, looking for fulfillment, looking for someone who will love her for who she is, to love her, embrace her, remain with her. And right here in the worst part of the day, she doesn't find Jesus, Jesus finds her. Jesus finds her. See, there's something worth mentioning here. This is a little detail that it's easy for us to miss. If you look at verse 11, this woman, she's full of good questions. She's very perceptive. This woman, she mentions that Jesus has nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep, right? Jesus offered living water. It's going to make you never thirsty again, but she's very practical. I like her. She's a practical woman. She's like, you don't have a bucket, Jesus, so how are you going to draw water for me? How is this going to work? Without the right tools or the right apparatus, in this case a bucket, how are we supposed to obtain what we need? See, rightly so, she's aware of her limitations. If I strive and reach for something, I'll get it. But if I don't strive and reach for something, I won't get it. Right? That's how our world works, right? That's what we've been conditioned to know and believe. But here's what she's forgetting. She's forgetting, perhaps, that this well that she's currently at is no ordinary well. You see, because Jewish tradition actually tells us that at the wells where the patriarchs encountered their brides, something supernatural would actually occur. I don't know if you know this, but at these wells, instead of the thirsty person having to reach down into the well with a bucket to draw the water that they needed, Jewish tradition tells us that at times a supernatural phenomenon would take place at these wells, where the water would actually miraculously bubble its way up to the surface and rise up to meet the people exactly where they were. Instead of going down into the water would literally bubble up and come up to them. See, in the same way, this Samaritan woman on this particular day, she wasn't searching for salvation. She wasn't looking for deliverance. She just needed a drink. In fact, it's the opposite. She was going to extraordinary lengths to avoid human interaction and connection. She was running the other way. And yet, in the same way that the water would bubble to the surface at Jacob's well all those years ago, in the same way, right now, Jesus, the living water, was flowing towards her. She didn't come to him, he came to her. He came to her. This is the essence, okay, of the Christian message. It's the gospel of grace. Not that we love God, not that we earned our way to God, not that we did the 12 steps and achieved enlightenment, not that we proved ourselves worthy and lovable to God. It's that while we were yet sinners running the opposite way, wanting nothing to do with God. That's when he came and reached us and rescued us and pulled us back and claimed us to be his own possession. You see, but that's not all. There's actually another little detail here I want to show you, which is very easy to miss. You remember Jesus tells her, okay, that she's had 5 husbands. 5. Okay? And on top of those 5 husbands, she is now presently with another man who is not her husband. So 5 husbands plus 1 existing partner brings a total to 6. Okay, it's easy maths. In the Bible, the number 6 is the number of human effort, which is incomplete and lacking. The 6 men that the Samaritan woman had been with represents her in her own way, trying to be complete, trying to be perfect, trying to be whole, and she's clearly fallen short of that. And then now, Jesus shows up as what comes after 6? 7. Okay, I think that's not a thing anymore. My kids tell me off for doing it because that's not a thing. But see, in the Bible, 6 represents human effort, 7 represents spiritual completion. You know what I find interesting? What Jesus is the 7th man. See, on a simple level, it says this at the beginning. Why did Jesus come to the world? Yes, to set up a divine appointment and to have this profound moment, yes. But on a practical level, why did Jesus come to the world? He was thirsty. He was tired, it says. Isn't it amazing that God got tired because he inhabited human flesh? But Jesus, he got tired and he was subject to the same frailties that you and I are. And so he was thirsty, and so we got to drink. But as you might know, this actually wasn't the last time that we read about Jesus getting thirsty. Fast forward a couple of chapters, in John 19, Jesus is now not at a well, but he's hanging on a cross. John chapter 19, and in his final moments on the cross, in verse 28, Jesus says, I am thirsty. I'm thirsty. You see, when Jesus hung on the cross and said those words, he wasn't just talking about a physical thirst. When he said that I'm thirsty on the cross, he was experiencing the full desolation of being forsaken by his Father in heaven. Not because he deserved it, but precisely because he didn't. As he hung on the cross, he took upon himself the full weight of our sin, our transgression, our shame. He endured it on our behalf, so that now when we come to him, now when we approach him at noon with our history, with our deflection, with all of the baggage that we carry, we discover the well of living water. You could say it this way: Jesus thirsted so that you and I never have to thirst again. He thirsted so that you and I never have to thirst again. And so what does all of this culminate in? It's our final point: go, go, go. See, after this surprising, life-altering encounter with Jesus, the woman leaves, and there are 3 things that happen when she leaves. Movement number one, she leaves without her jar. We didn't read this part of the story, but verse 28, it says this. Verse 28, well, I won't read out the whole thing, but the woman leaves her jar behind. She arrived at the well that afternoon needing water, but she leaves having found something far more important than physical water. She forgets it entirely as a water and just goes. You see, so often we come to Jesus with our immediate felt needs. And there's nothing wrong with that, because he does supply our every need. We need healing, we need provision, we need friendship, we need community. These are felt needs. We can come to Jesus with those things. But time and time again, we come to him with our physical needs, our felt needs, and Jesus gives us something better and deeper. And think about the paralytic. I need to be able to walk. Jesus says, I'll one-up you. You can walk, but I'm going to forgive you of your sins as well. This woman needed a drink, but she got living water. You see, whatever you came carrying today, whatever your need, whatever your desperation, Jesus may want you to leave it behind, because he has something far better for you. You see, not only does the woman leave the jar behind, where does she go? She goes back into town. The very people she had been hiding from, She came to the well at noon to avoid them. But something shifted so fundamentally in her that she doesn't hesitate. She runs back into the city. She's coming out of hiding. But the third thing she does, she doesn't just leave the jar behind. She doesn't just go back into the town. It's not just that she now feels a bit more confident about herself and has been cured of social anxiety. It's so much more than that. She runs into the city. Why? Because she's been armed with a testimony. She now has a message that she has to tell everyone. The woman at the well becomes the very first evangelist in the Gospel of John. The first person to whom Jesus reveals his full identity is also the first person to bring a crowd to him. I wish this woman was in our church. What a powerful testimony. Here's what, look at this quote from D.T. Niles. He said that Christianity is one beggar telling another beggar where he found bread. See, this woman doesn't have a theology degree. She hasn't cleaned up her past. She hasn't gone to therapy. She hasn't sought reconciliation with all 6 men. She hasn't done any of that. Maybe that will come later in her life. We don't know. But she had an encounter with Jesus, and she can't keep it to herself. I want to ask you 2 questions as we bring this to a close. And I know we've pointed out lots of little details about the story, and we can dig into the idiosyncrasies of that, and you can discuss that in your dinner parties. Great, do all of that stuff. But don't be like the woman right now, ducking and weaving from what God is wanting to do in your life. Because here's the first thing I would say to you, the first question I would ask you, church, is if you have also been running and hiding, just like this woman has. I want to tell you this morning that Jesus sees you. Maybe you've been hiding in plain sight. Maybe you've been hiding behind a title here at church. You give, you serve, you lead, you show up, you can talk the talk, you can walk the walk. But beneath all of those layers, Jesus is wanting to work on something in you. He's not wanting to expose you or to shame you or humiliate you. He wants to find you. He wants to cross every barrier to get to you. There's no wrong time for this. Nothing can disqualify you. Whatever makes you think that you're too complicated or too far gone or there's too much mess or it's like I've been managing it for too long, I'm just going to keep managing it for the rest of my life. Don't buy that lie. Jesus is setting up an appointment with you today. Stop running. It's time for you to actually reciprocate his initiative. He's coming to you. Will you stop, pause, and sit with Jesus and allow him to do the work that he wants to do in you? That's the first question. But here's the second question, and I'm going to ask you to stand in a moment to pray over you. Here's the second question. What are you drinking that's only making you more thirsty? Jesus said that everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. You see, there are things that you and I consume and run to and reach for that promise satisfaction, but they deliver diminishing returns. Each hit of whatever it is that you're reaching for leaves you with a need for a larger dose the next time. And that's because it was never designed to quench you of your deeper thirst. You see, the thirst that exists at your deepest core is a spiritual thirst. And only what Jesus offers can quench that this morning.
If you enjoyed this message, check out more on our Saints YouTube and podcast channels. For those who want to know more about Jesus, find a Christian community to be a part of, or you're exploring faith, why not join us this coming Sunday for our 11 a.m. service. We are a growing, vibrant church in the heart of Petaling Jaya in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, with an interactive kids program for 2 to 12s, facilities for parents with under 2s, and freshly brewed coffee available from 30 minutes before each service. We're confident you'll live encouraged. Find out more on our website, saints.my, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook now. We can't wait to host you.